Hello, hello. So I have reached the end of the day, and today and yesterday have been big action days as far as the IHOPKC stuff goes. And I haven't even caught up on everything. So me and my husband, we run a company here in Kansas City. We are trying to make some very, very aggressive personal financial, home related goals that it's pretty much taking all of our time. We have been in a season of life where we've been going from about 5 a.m. until 10 or 11 p.m. every single day except for Saturday for, I want to say 9 or 10 months. And before that, I was pregnant and just going through it. So it's been a very stressful season. I don't have a lot of time by any means for enjoyable things, let alone for, stuff like this. So I'm still interested though, and whenever I see all of these videos and tweets and everything, I try to kind of look into it because I do feel somewhat invested. But there's a point where when you hear the same story over and over and over, and you're like, okay, no matter what they do, IHOP does not seem to change their willingness to bring in that third party, and they're stuck on repeat. Doesn't matter who's talking, they're stuck on repeat with their own representatives griping and complaining about how the other side wants a fair third-party process to come in and do an open investigation and bring everything into light. And I don't think that that's unreasonable by any means. I was pretty impressed with General Fuller in his Friday night statement. It's the first one that I've heard. And I just remember thinking, wow, this guy seems pretty competent. He seems like he is empathetic without being codependent. It seems like he is strong and fortified in his boundaries and clear-minded and unemotional about this whole process. And he just seemed pretty with it. And I liked how he made several statements about taking a firm stand against misconduct, creating systems of accountability, creating leadership training programs. I think that's great. And I think that that's all very necessary. And I agreed with pretty much all of his statements on the Friday night announcement that he made. But then he came out with this 5-minute cease and desist about the advocate group made a 3-video series where a lot of the leaders got together and kind of shared their own stories about this situation and an affair between Luke Bickle and a woman in town, and then the ladies. I don't know a lot of these people, so I recognize them, but I'm horrible with names to begin with. And I'm not an IHOPU student. I've always been someone who attends the prayer room and who goes to Forerunner Church. But that's kind of the extent of my involvement. And of course, I've taken several inner healing classes, and, for several years, I went to the prayer room every day for a couple hours a day. So I recognize people. I just don't know, oh, that's who this is and that's what they do and yada yada. I love Alan Hood though. So, I really appreciated them sharing the story. I appreciated them filming in December with their Christmas tree in the background so that we all know, okay, this was about this time frame that they're all talking about this. Word on the street is they didn't release the video because they were in talks with IHOP and the ELT, and they were hoping that they could get some movement but I guess they couldn't, so they released the video. But knowing the time frame, I think, is somewhat valuable. General Fuller's cease and desist basically said, hey, I really needed this private info, and I'm going to paraphrase. He was like, hey, I really need all of this private information from you guys so that I can work hard within IHOP, because they've contracted me to come up with a solution for them. And if you could just tell me everything, that'd be great. Well, IHOP has a bunch of attorneys, and all of the different parties are lawyering up, and, they're paying for General Fuller to come in and make his determinations and recommendations. So he's biased. You can't expect someone who is receiving a paycheck from one side to truly be an unbiased party within a dispute of this level, and they really shouldn't function as a mediator of any sort. And General Fuller was frustrated. He was saying, look, I have done all of these high-level negotiations with foreign people and with our own government, and all sorts of different types of very important relationships, and I've never seen anything like this. Well, okay, but, I don't think it's that surprising, because not we as in, like, I guess I identify more with the advocate side, and the expectation from the advocate side has been, let's get a third-party investigator, someone who neither one of us are really tied to. We're both going to expose everything to that person, let them sort through all of the information, make determinations, and make it public. We've already brought all the public in, so that's the appropriate resolve at this point. Well, IHOP doesn't want that. They want to handle everything as internally and privately as possible. And, at this point, you can only assume, and I think not even at this point, like a week or two in forward, you could only really assume that the reason that they don't want to be transparent, and the reason that they don't want to bring all of this out into the open and into the light, is because there's a lot more issues that would make them look bad than they would care to let on. What those issues might be, we don't know. We're left to speculate and wonder. But they're big enough where they don't want anyone to touch this organization and comb through it with, a 50-foot pole. So they're doing everything that they can to avoid that. And I think that is very sus. So General Fuller ended his cease and desist by saying, you guys shared all of the secrets with the world before telling me, and I don't like it. And then he said, because of that, we're just going to make our own plan. And, we're going to figure out our own answer to the solutions and do it on our own. And I think that's disappointing. And I think it's a bad call. At least, from me, I would consider myself in the outer tier. I haven't been a part of IHOP in about 4 years. I've gone to a few special events and stuff, but and I did an inner healing class this summer with them. But aside from that kind of stuff, I really have not been a regular attendee, nor have I gone to the prayer room regularly in 4 years. I'm just so sad because it's obvious that there's a lot of dishonesty. It's obvious that there's no desire, no willingness to be honest, authentic, or real. And I think as a result, it's really going to create an irreparable mistrust among definitely people who aren't involved anymore. So many people have left and walked away from this ministry. And I think that the people who are there, I honestly cannot understand why you would stay in light unless you just don't want to acknowledge some of the things that have happened and some of the mishandling of the leadership. So it's just a shame, and it's shameful, and I am just heavy. My heart is heavy for this situation. I've lived and done a lot of things that I am really regretful of. And what I have learned through my sin is exposing it, bringing it to light, being transparent, and owning the most dark and detestable parts of myself. That is the way to freedom. And I do not see these people who I've looked up to and who I learned from and who took authoritative roles from the pulpit in my life. I don't see them doing that. And it's heartbreaking and it's shocking. Now, having said that, I'm not traumatized by it. I've seen people posting these Facebook statuses about how they're so traumatized by this whole event, and maybe they are. I'm not. I have a job. I have a business. I have friends that, my relationships are not contingent upon the stand that I take within this issue. So I don't have a ton of skin in the game, but I know that there are people who do, whose relationships are directly tied to their stand on this issue, their finances, their ability to provide for their family. So there are really real and practical issues. And for them to be playing these games while they know that there are families with children who need to pay their bills and, they're support-raised missionaries. They don't have skill sets. They can't just go out and get a job tomorrow because they've been here in the prayer movement as support-raised missionaries for the last 15 years. That's pretty serious. And you're not caring for the flock whenever you hold out like that. And for what reason? Why would you want to be so private? So yeah, the cease and desist was very disappointing. I haven't read any of the responses or anything like that, and I'm not sure if I'll have time to. We have a number of deadlines that we are working with in our business and with taxes and, all that stuff. So we're trying to sort everything out this week. But I did want to say that much. And I'm just sad. I feel like it's so disappointing. I wish that they just get that third-party investigation going and bring it all out into the open and be done with it, And if it had been handled like that from the get-go, or even with an honest mediation process, I don't think a lot of this would have happened. And it's a shame that they don't recognize that. It's a shame that there have been lies, it seems, on both sides of the equation. It's just a bunch of liars, and until you come clean with every detail, you're going to be caught in that habit of lying, and you're going to be caught in that cycle. And the scary thing about lying, and this is why I try with everything I have not to be a liar, is when you start lying at a certain point, you start to believe the lies, and then you don't know truth from deceit. And that is scary. to think that you could be such a liar that you can't even recognize truth anymore, that's scary. And to think that a bunch of people are leading this organization and stewarding the hearts of tens of thousands of people, if not more, who are trapped in that level of deceit, that's a problem. So those are my thoughts about it. I'm still praying about, like, do I just need to, like, stop reading and stop looking into everything? I feel like there's almost nothing that could be said that I haven't already said about it. I've made my determination, and after I decided, okay, they're liars, their hearts are hard, they're not willing to look into this fairly and justly, that was whenever I just kind of decided, okay, shake, the sand off your feet and say good riddance. I'm not going to have anything to do with that ministry or organization again. And because I've already said everything that I think about it, and I don't think any of that's going to change, what more is there to say, So that's kind of where I think I'm leaving it, unless Brandon wants to make a video. I don't think he's heard any of the most recent information. But that's it. I'm still going to probably watch videos as they come out from, like, the Wake Up and Win. I like them a lot. And there's a few other people who I like to listen to and just hear their thoughts about it all. But I just don't see anything new happening, One of the things that I did notice after watching the 3 videos with the ELT was several people in those 3 videos would say things like, we never wanted to know this information. These are problems we never wanted to have to face. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what they were saying. And I think, okay, well, that's part of the biggest problem within this iceberg of issues is the leaders on both sides and the leaders who have already left did not want to know this kind of stuff. And I think even if they are innocent and really didn't know anything was going on, they are guilty of not wanting to know. And I do think that there are tiny choices that we make when we don't want to know something. For example, try to think of an analogy. If you can go through year after year after year and just not file your taxes. Okay, I've made this money, I'm just not gonna file. Well, when it comes time to purchase property or to qualify for different things, you're going to be expected to provide that information. And if you have to suddenly get it all together, you're going to owe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of money. You can do that with your student loans. Put them off time and time again. I'm guilty of that. I have yet to pay my student loans. If you keep ignoring them, eventually you're going to have to pay the student loans and all of the interest that has accrued. And I think, okay, yeah, you can choose to be ignorant so that you can feel guilt-free and so that you can feel innocent within a situation, but that doesn't mean that you are guilt-free and it doesn't mean that you're innocent. As a leader, you have an obligation to ask difficult questions. You have an obligation to have a certain level of discernment so that you can see through some of the hidden things and then press the issues. And I think a lot of people in this organization have thought, oh, it's none of my business, I'm not going to get involved. Or it was, hey, that's not within our realm, that's not our wheelhouse, we're not going to get involved. I mean, in my own situation, I've had 2 negative large experiences here. that I've made videos about, but one of them, whenever I first moved to Kansas City, I was raped by a coworker. I was a flight attendant, and I was raped by my pilot, and I came to IHOP for help because they're a large Christian organization, and I was new to the area, and I asked what resources they had, and they had nothing to give me, no referrals, nothing. And I said, is anyone willing to even just pray with me? I'm suffering. I don't really want to have to call the crisis hotline. I can't afford to pay $125 an hour to speak to a counselor and not get any better. There has to be something. And they said, no one's even willing to pray with me. And I just feel like that's appalling. For them to have done that. I was a hurting person who needed Jesus and who needed an encounter with Jesus. And that is the responsibility, I think, of every believer, is if you know Jesus, if you claim Jesus as Lord of your life, you have an obligation to give him out to the brokenhearted and to the hurting, in the very least. And they failed. And I'm just one person. There are hundreds and thousands of people. There are groups online for IHOP survivors. There is a website with the stories of IHOP, of bad IHOP experiences, and it's a large number of people. So all of these people who have had these bad experiences talk about how they were ignored and put off and rejected. And that was under the leadership of the advocate group, of the people who make up the advocate group. Everyone wants to be a victim. But in this case, I think very few people are sincere, genuine victims. Yes, they were probably caught off guard on some level, but they're also responsible on some level. And I think one of the things I was most impressed with during the 3-part series of the advocate group was whenever Alan Hood basically said, hey, I'm ready to be examined. Like, I understand that that's part of this, but in full transparency, like, no one wants their life combed through, but I'm willing to submit myself to that process for the sake of getting to the truth and pruning the bush, let's do it. That's awesome. And it's needed, because I don't know how someone could come in and make all of this right without that process. They're just going to keep repeating the same cycles that they've had since the beginning, and then since before the beginning, whenever they had other ministries. You hear about Paul Cain and Bob Jones, and I did not even know that those men had been involved in other sexual scandals. And I've learned that throughout all of this process. And I think it's important to understand and to recognize that, because it's a big issue and it's generational. And until the people responsible right now are willing to set a better example by repenting, and that means doing the opposite, how can they expect things to get better under their watch? Maybe the next generation can, but that's hard to make that transition, because there's a lot of overlap whenever you transition leaderships within any organization. Another thing I'd like to say before I finish is, I've been talking to a friend who has been brought up, in this type of movement, the charismatic, genre. And, we were talking, and I was basically saying, it just shocks me. Like, it truly shocks me that people could have sincerely not known about all of this. But I remember some of the things that she told me about her upbringing and how, like, you don't ask questions, you don't challenge, you don't doubt, you don't question. And if you do, it's not worth it. So I think that there's at least 1 or 2 generations that have been raised within this church and within this movement and this denomination of Christianity, where they have been raised, do not question your faith, do not question your leaders, do not question the Bible as we interpret it. Otherwise, you're not saved. You're not living in faith, and you're wrong. And I could see, especially if someone was raised in that from infancy or childhood, I could see how after a generation or 2 of that kind of thinking and raising, you could get to this point where you might sincerely not know a lot of these things. And I could see how that could set someone up for a lot of abuse, a lot of deception, manipulation, and false belief. And I could see how that could make it very challenging to leave, because I know, at least for me, whenever I started trying other churches, I really had to push through this thinking of, does anyone else know Jesus like I've experienced him at IHOP? And I felt less godly, and I felt, without those emotional highs that you get in the IHOP and the charismatic denomination, it really felt very bland, and it felt disingenuine to me, and it felt like the people who I was getting to know in different churches and different settings were more surface level Christians without any depth. And I had a real problem with that until I really started to get to know them, and I saw the perseverance, and I saw that when the rubber met the road, they had traction. Where, at IHOP, almost every situation I can think of, when the rubber met the road, the wheels just spun and the car didn't go anywhere within my relationships. I've had very petty, immature relationships here at IHOP. And I do think that comes with that whole mindset of you don't question, accept what the leaders say, go with your feelings. There's a lot of emphasis on feelings here that is not healthy, and it's not right. So I've already talked enough, but those are my thoughts. I don't see myself making any videos unless I have something new to say, or unless Brandon is available and wants to contribute his opinion. So there you have it. I'll talk to you later. Bye.